Ketosis and endurance. Should distance runners try a low carbohydrate, high fat diet? This diet is characterized by a carbohydrate intake that is significantly lower than that of most runners, 20 to 50 grams per day, moderate protein consumption, and then fat making up at least 70% of overall energy intake. For our purposes, we will define endurance races as events lasting longer than 3 hours. So for recreational runners, this would include the marathon distance and then anything exceeding that distance for any runner brave enough to do that. The rationale behind the high fat, low carbohydrate diet that seems very counterintuitive to most runners who are used to carbohydrate loading is that these athletes might have a greater capacity to complete endurance exercise when they're relying on the free fatty acids, ketone bodies, and increased efficiency of gluconeogenesis when they are keto adapted. Essentially, having their bodies practice and get used to using fat as their primary energy source when they run out of glycogen or their glycogen stores get low, where runners typically experience that feeling of hitting a wall and not having the energy that they need to complete these events and maximize their performance. So currently, the research is not super positive. At least at the most optimistic, there's a mixed results on attempting this diet for distance runners. A walking event that was a study done in 2020, they noted a significant performance decline in the runners on the high fat, low carbohydrate diet. In a race to exhaustion that was a running event in 2017, the low carb, high fat diet did not impact performance. And in that one, I think there were some metabolic adaptations in terms of fat oxidation, but it was not enough to impact performance, or it did not impact performance at that level. For a 3 hour ultra running event, there was a noted increased fat oxidizing rate. But again, that did not lead to any kind of performance improvement for those runners. And more recently, a study just published last month did not actually find a significant difference in the rate that fat was being oxidized by either the high fat, low carb, and high carbohydrate diet groups. And that one also found that there was no difference significantly in performance amongst groups. So that kind of leads to this conclusion that this diet might not be something that runners should be trying necessarily. There's just not a huge body of evidence supporting that A, these metabolic changes are significant, and B, that these metabolic changes in energy production are impacting performance in a positive way for these athletes. In terms of fat being oxidized, that rate as it turns out, can be achieved a high rate between 8/10 and 1 gram per minute, was being achieved by both groups, high fat, low carbohydrate, and the low carbohydrate are just the high carbohydrate, more traditional diet. They were both able to oxidize fat at a similar rate. One reason that this diet may be selected by runners is those with gastrointestinal issues, particularly during performance, which can be common amongst ultramarathon runners. This population may benefit actually from trying this more keto style diet because the high carbohydrate intake often leads to more gastrointestinal issues. Another adjustment that they might want to try first, rather than going keto, since keto may have that negative performance impact, is to look at their VO2 max. There is some research that indicates perhaps how many carbohydrates each runner really needs, how often they should fuel, and at what amount is more impacted by what percent of their VO2 max they are performing at. And for some of us, we might be getting a little bit more, a little bit less carbohydrates than we need because there's more individual variability than previously thought. So I would start there, and that's what I would recommend to ultra runners looking to make some dietary adjustments to prevent gastrointestinal issues while still maximizing their energy intake, before I would recommend to someone to try a high fat, low carbohydrate diet. Because in conclusion, based on current research It appears that endurance capacity still remains limited by glucose availability, and there's really no clear benefit for endurance athletes following a ketogenic diet. Thank you.